All right, so it is 11 a.m. I'll say let's go ahead and get started. I think I'm getting chatted from someone. Oh, I don't want to stop sharing. Okay. So we are at the 11 a.m. hour. Okay, thank you everybody for joining UXPA International this afternoon. You're in for a real treat. We have Satyam Kantamneni from UX Reactor, and today he's going to talk to us about communicating the business value of design. A few housekeeping items before we kick off the webinar. Everybody is on mute. We are going to ask that if you have any questions, please write your questions in the Q&A box. What's going to happen is towards the end of the actual webinar, about 10 minutes to the hour, Satyam and Sarah will be answering your questions. If you're interested in future short courses and webinars, be sure to check the UX Education tab on uxpa.org. Next, Satyam will be leading the short course, Leading with Business for Design Leads, coming up in March. So if you like what you hear today and you want to go for a deeper dive into this particular area and content, please join the short course, Leading with Business for Design Leads. And the short course registration is available on uxpa.org under Education and Short Courses. Last but not least, early bird registration is now open. So our international conference is going to be held in Baltimore in 2020. So please go ahead and register now for that early bird registration. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and pass it over to Satya.
Awesome. I need to remember to unmute myself. Thank you, Kam. You guys can hear me well?
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm also joined on the call or on the webinar with my coworker, Sarah, who basically will also be co-instructing the short course, but also has been a key integral part of our organization. So she will also help with assisting in the Q&A part as we kind of get into that conversation. And thank you, Kam. Thank you, Kam, for introducing us. And I hope this would be as useful to everyone by the time we are done. So let me go to presenter mode. Sarah, we have good. Is it projecting well?
No, not yet. Still on video.
Still on video. Let me see. I need to hit share. Now it should present.
Now we're good.
Awesome. Awesome. So let me start introducing a little bit more about the firm itself. UX Reactor is a design consulting firm. We are based in the Pleasanton Bay Area location with an extension of our team in Hyderabad, India, as well as in Medellin, Colombia. The whole philosophy of our organization when we created it 5 years back was that design has not been driving business. And this came back from I'll tell a little bit of a story of how we ended up where we are. Give me a second. Are you guys hearing background noises from my side, or are you hearing it from somewhere else? Sarah, do you hear any background noises?
I'm not at this time.
Okay, fair enough. You can always raise a question and we can get to that. So the whole intent is design is becoming more and more impactful, but then how do we make sure that we get into a situation where business also starts appreciating it that way? So we started the firm and ran a bunch of experiments, said, how do we train? How do we look for people, process, environment, and get in that model? So that's the highest level. I'm Satyam, the co-founder of UX Reactor. And then Sarah has also joined on the call today. We will be pretty much very actively involved through the short course as well as in today's webinar. So again, feel free to ask us any questions. That is actually, I believe, the most important part of this whole webinar, where we can actually make it interactive. But before that, I'm going to share a little bit of a context setting structure that allows us to at least frame the situation and the theme in some way. So as I said, UX Reactor is a design firm. We're based in Pleasanton area. The whole goal was to kind of drive a business that actually drives business outcomes for our clients. And through that, we tried out a lot of techniques, which we'll share a little bit with you today. And we'll give you a sense of how that actually is, as deliberate as we are, it still is a hard process. But there are still some ways that we can keep pushing that boundaries. So what we've been doing at UX Reactors, as we run our experiments, we try different ways of engaging with clients, different ways of how do we kind of get better and better and better at driving business value. We've been documenting it, and that's what we're calling our playbook. For the last 5.5 years, that's what we've been doing. We've been documenting how do you do a requirements grooming? How do you document? How do you actually build a roadmap which is experience centric? And these are all become plays in our playbook. And that's when the whole conversation with UXPA International and CARM started as this playbook kind of started becoming more and more robust. UXPA International approached us and had a discussion of saying that can we actually open the playbook a little bit more to the larger members of the organization. And then we said we open to it, and that this is the first of the many conversations that we are doing, and business thinking is a big part of it. And we want to make sure that we share more and more with the community, and so that this playbook keeps getting better and stronger. And more importantly, whatever we have learned is kind of start getting propagated on a larger level, because we as designers need to drive a lot more value, and the business needs that from us. So I'll start out with a story of why even do this, right? So the world did not need another design firm. The world did not need another playbook, or so on and so forth. So I'll give you a story on my end. Roughly about 5-6 years back, I was running a design organization in a pretty large software company, and I've been in design leadership for about 10 years at that point. And my question was, what do I do next? I'm running design, everyone's happy, design's going on, releases are happening. But what do I do next? I have just genuinely, and this was me in all practical sense, thinking about what's my next step. And as part of that conversation, I worked with a very supportive organization, and they said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to learn business. I want to go on the business side of things. And that started my journey of me going to HBS in an exec program that actually is all execs from a similar background, have been doing what they're doing, have grown functionally in their organization, but now are becoming more general managers in their organization. So this was a very interesting thing. I went to business school, obviously wanting to be a business guy. My eventual career plan was to become a general manager in this, if I continued on in the organization. But what I realized is when you sat there, they were talking a lot of customer centricity in the program. They were talking a lot about design thinking. They were talking a lot about listen to the customer, do what they want, and iterate multiple times. And everyone there is taking notes. Now, be mindful. The program of HBS by far has been for me has been the best educational experience on my end. But more importantly, it was a lot of execs with a significant clout. I had people in the program who had all the way from a few $1 million in budget capabilities to about $5 billion in budget capability, right? So these are very senior stakeholders that you're working with. And what was interesting is when you sit in the class and you kind of have an out of the body experience where you start observing people taking notes about listen to the customer, iterate, talk to your customer often, and all the things that we as designers are trained again and again and again to do. For me, the epiphany came to the fact that we are doing design, the business doesn't understand design the way we do it. And that has to change. So I came back to my organization and I started talking to people and I said, we need to do more business design. We need to drive business. And what was interesting also, so I went to this program in 2013. 2007, 2008 was a very interesting, I would say, watershed movement in the evolution of this profession. What actually happened is you had the iPhone come out, you had then after a couple of years the iPad come out. Everything was becoming more and more ubiquitous. It was becoming technology and experiences, and then new product lines were coming out which are all experience built, and their business was starting to realize that design sells. And they obviously know they've been doing it their way, and now suddenly there's a whole need on the other side of driving more business outcomes. And I came back to my organization and I started talking like, what business are we driving? And I asked all my stakeholders and leaders and everyone else. And then the biggest thing that I got back was this reaction, right? So everybody is like, what are you talking about, right? And this is the same thing that, good or bad, I was also in about a year back, right? So I was in a situation where I'm sitting there and I'm looking at what is my success criteria? And like, we had 3 releases in the year. We designed well. We did usability testing for all 3 of them. And we kind of built different iterations and then we shipped it. Awesome. That was my success criteria. We shipped it and that's it. And everybody was coming back with the same thing. Now, what is interesting a little bit that I'll share is this is what's happening on the other side. You're seeing business schools teaching design a lot more. And this has been a very interesting phenomena. All business schools, including HBS, are teaching the design thinking, are teaching design as a mindset. Now, what is interesting is Stanford actually has a boot camp, which is a 3-day boot camp, which teaches design thinking for execs. It's always sold out. And the 3-day boot camp goes for about $9,000 for a 3-day program. Now, the cost apart, what you're against, so you start noticing these dots that are connecting, that business is there wanting the value of design. That is not changing. You talk to any C-level exec, everybody's talking customer centricity. Everybody's talking about how do we drive things there. But design is not getting there. As I said, I mean, I'm getting more and more of this. Even after starting UX Reactor, we talk to a lot of design leaders. We talk to a lot of designers. The organization is not just ready to kind of make that level of a shift because we have been so used to doing what we are doing in our way. So I'm going to start out a little bit with where is the state of the UX profession right now, right? The profession is a phenomenal profession, but where is this profession going? And I'll state out a few facts that we are observing on the ground. The first thing is UX, and the X is more important. Experiences are becoming ubiquitous. Everybody is building experiences. There's a whole philosophy of experience economy that's coming in, and you're seeing more and more of that. Products are being built, experiences are being built, service experiences, you're looking at augmented experiences, everything is kind of coming more and more. And obviously the experiences, as most digital designers know it, it's also becoming ubiquitous. Thermostats have experiences, automotives have experiences. As more and more products are becoming software defined, experiences are what's selling products. So experiences are not going anywhere. And we need to make sure that we are bringing in a lot more of that focus. But what's happening is the profession of the designer is dying a slow death. I'll let that sink in a little bit. Because what's actually happening on the other side is the whole profession is getting commoditized. The skills are getting commoditized, the tools are getting commoditized. Product managers nowadays, and I was at a meeting just this last couple of days, where with a group of product managers, and they were talking Figma, they were talking UX Pen, they were talking tools, and they were doing it themselves. Why do you need a designer when I can drag and drop a whole UI? We had developers who were like, just give me the flow and I will design it. So developers are doing it, product managers are doing it. The skills are becoming more and more open-ended. There is it's just getting commoditized to a point where it is very hard if you just do the old way of doing it, where we eventually are just doing more UI design. There's a whole talk about AI doing visual design, AI presenting design in a way that the user wants it based on the other products that they actually have and other styles that they've selected. There's a whole pressure that's coming in market dynamics wise, right? Most skills are being commoditized, tools are being commoditized. So what exactly is the value that designers are creating? We need to fundamentally ask that question. And for sure, what got us here won't get us there, right? There is no doubt about that. The amount of sensitization that people have around design is insane. In fact, product managers are also taught to do research. In fact, I go to organizations. One of the best things about running a consulting firm is you get a whole slew of exposure from so many different clients. And we have clients who have literally come to us and said, our product managers talk to users, so we don't need user research. We have had clients who have come to us and said, developers can do UI, so we don't need UI. So then what are we doing? I think that's a foundational question. As many organizations look back, you'll start realizing that there is a very different chain of value creation, and we need to understand where we are and what the organization is expecting of us. So the foundational point is we need to change. There is no doubt about that. I can say this with a lot of conviction and confidence that the profession that we have practiced the last decade is not going to be how we practice this in the next decade. We need to kind of drive a lot more. The business wants us to drive more and more. We need to be ready to drive more and more. So that is foundationally what is happening in the market. So close to about 2 decades back, Thomas Watson Jr., who was actually at that point the CEO of IBM, said this very interesting statement. He said, good design is good business. So I think that if you foundationally look at it, the intent has been always there, right? But if you look at how design has evolved, one of the bigger challenges how design has come, because people, it's a melting pot. You have people from architecture, graphic design, engineering, so many different backgrounds who come in. There's no real degree that teaches you to, this is the only degree that you get in to get design. And business, some people have business sense, some people don't have business sense, some people have business skills. So that's the reason the melting pot is good, because you do so much creativity, but the fact is that it also needs to start getting standardized. And good design to drive good business, we need to start talking about business as the main outcome, right? I consistently at UX Reactor, when we finish a project, as we do the wrap up engagement, we kind of start looking at the key aspect is not that we have designed 15 workflows. That no one cares about 15 workflows. The question is each workflow, did it save $100,000? And did we save $1.5 million in the end of the whole conversation by saving those clicks, by getting better experience, by getting whatever? This is just the tangible, measurable element. The intangible of somebody immediately opening a screen and then getting whatever there, or immediately getting a message when something goes wrong, is a very different intangible aspect that most times are not even truly measurable. But the fact is, good design is good business. And what's interesting is there's a lot of data report. There's the Design Management Institute. There is McKinsey's most recent report said that companies that actually have a good design culture are typically beating the market and their other peers by 2 times. Just think about it, right? So this is why businesses care, right? If others are doing 3 to 6% annual year-over-year increase, good design practices, when you're focused on user, you're consistently iterating, you have a good design culture, it all converts into real dollars. Think about a company that is making $1 billion in profit is suddenly looking at $2 billion in profit, right? When I talk to business leaders, they always say that, hey, $1 in sales gives us 5 in revenue. But they never talk about design that way, $1 in design. So design has always been, foundationally, as the last 10 years, has been a very supportish, non-strategic arm, right? So we need to evolve. And this is, again, the data is out there and it's staring in our face. So I'm going to share a little bit now after the whole, setting up the the context of where we are as a profession. And it's a very honest look in the mirror. So we need to, again, happy to kind of discuss this with anybody at any forum. But more importantly, there are 4 ways to evolve this moving forward. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means, and I'll give you a couple of tips in today's webinar. And then obviously in the short course, we'll go deeper into these and topics. So the first thing is right focus. How do we create the right focus of what we are investing our time in, right? Are we driving the right outcome? We should not do a design ever as a profession because someone asked us to do a design. Don't do a dashboard or don't do a mobile product because someone asked you to do a mobile product. The foundational question is, what business outcome is it going to drive? Is it going to drive better adoption in the market? Is it going to drive better retention, better satisfaction, better engagement, more efficiency? And each one of them, by the way, is directly correlated to the business. More adoption means more customers. That means more dollars. More retention means more recurring revenue. More satisfaction means more referrals. More engagement means that you actually have more renewals. More efficiency means you have doing more with less, right? You start talking business language. And when we start focusing on that, the foundational thing is do not solve, if you do not understand the business outcome you're trying to go after, you're solving a problem you don't understand. So don't even do it. Don't waste your time. Your time is the most precious resource, right? And I say this at the firm, I say it for everyone else I meet, but this is the most important fact to kind of drive a clear business outcome. The next thing is alignment. How do we align ourselves to kind of make sure that we're driving business value? You can align yourself and design problems, right? So the first is make sure that anything that you are talking, when we design, there are problems we solve. Customers expect a product to, or users expect a product to be useful. So that's a problem we need to solve. We need to make sure that we understanding what useful is. It needs to be usable. So we need to solve those problems. But what is very interesting as designers is we need to start looking at opportunities. What if we did this? What if we did that? And those what if scenarios, as you start looking at those modalities, when you start understanding a user really well and you understand their pain points, we are in the cutting edge of any design profession or any actually innovation profession, because you can think of it, you can immediately put it into some kind of a prototype, you can test that prototype. All 3 skills are available within this profession. And when you look at an opportunity, what if we actually, built a community portal for this? You can think about it, you can prototype it, you can quickly, design it and test it. So at this point, you have everything you have on your hand to kind of look at an opportunity. And this is what we mean by an opportunity. When you start noticing what's available there, and why not just create a quick prototype? Evolve it. And then when you start looking at the business, most new businesses are created when you start looking at what if questions, not how might we solve a problem, right? So don't solve design problems are table stakes. We need to move it to design opportunities. We need to start looking at how do we push the boundaries around thinking the what ifs. And that is the right alignment, aligning our investments of our own time into the right focus. Businesses will appreciate it, because think about it. You go to a general manager of a business and say, what if we build this? I actually think we can build $1 million business or tens of millions of dollars of business by creating a net new product. In this case, Apple asked that question, and therefore they created a multi-billion dollar product that still gives them billions of dollars of profit every year. The third thing is focusing and creating the right value and opportunities. So investing, again, how do you invest your time, right? So you basically start, sorry, not third thing. So that is basically the takeaway, is make sure you're focusing on creating the right value and the right opportunities. The third thing is governance. And governance is a business term that's used consistently in the market and the business side of the world, where how do you know that good things are happening? How do we govern a system? It's just not like we are working with an organization right now that has a huge design team. But there's no real structured governance, because people are hired at different design leaders at different places, and then all the designers are just doing what they want to do. how do you govern that the investment as an organization is driven right? And this is important around when you start looking at as business leads and design managers is what's your portfolio? Do you have a good mix of talent? And a portfolio planning on the business side is that you actually have a good mix, a good hedge around different people. Do you have a good mix of research insights? Do you have a good mix of design experiments, right? All the way from for problems that you need to solve to what if problems, right? Are you solving UI problems, UX problems, or CX problems? CX becoming more organizational in nature. Like how might we actually build a much more experiential culture in the whole organization is a CX problem, right? But you need to divide it up. Everything that you're doing, if your resources were 100, you need to make sure that your 100 resources in whatever the measure of resource, talent, research, design, is divided as a portfolio. And if you don't do that, you are not governing it right. You have no idea. You're just doing too myopic. You can be too short-sighted, and that actually has its own issues, right? Just in research, to give you an example, a lot of organizations unfortunately invest a lot of their research resourcing around validation. And validation is awesome. I think we should validate every product by all means. But if you're not spending the time doing formative analysis, by the way, a lot of the what if opportunities come out in the formative aspect. That's when you start looking at it. There's a whole technique called lead user research, where you kind of go talk to users that are using your product in unintended ways. Now, if you did a formative research around people who are using your product in unintended uh, ways, you actually can start thinking about new market opportunities. Think about it, right? When the business wants more money, business wants more ways to kind of deploy their product. As a designer, as a researcher, we go there, you quickly are looking at doing lead research as a technique, investing the time, come back with a list of different opportunities, quickly prototype it, test it, and suddenly we can create a business model around it. Again, right? We have all the skills. Business needs to kind of start seeing those variables. The last one is right language. This is a illustrative image of a boardroom. Now, when you look at a boardroom, there's a lot of different people in the boardroom, and the biggest thing that they're looking for is shareholder value, right? And shareholder value is, as an organization, are you creating value for the people who actually are the owners of the firm? And a lot of the times you look at data around, and this is an example where it's called the DuPont equation. It talks to you a little bit about return on equity. And return on equity is defined by, the equation defines it as a variable of three different variables that actually impact return on an equity. Equity is how much you have invested and what are you getting on that. One is profit margin. How much are you making per product? How many products are you turning over that you actually, if you are producing that product, how many times are you going through that? And finally, how much money have you leveraged to kind of get to this whole system? Now think about it. There's a whole construct of design premium where and this is all over the world, and you start noticing it in the profession, when you design a product right and it solves the user's problem right, they are willing to pay a premium. They're not asking you for a discount when they see the efficiency gain that they have and the data that they need when they need it. And therefore they're willing to pay more, and that margin goes up. So when you talk to a business leader and say, I can do these what if scenarios, or I can solve this problem this way, and therefore I can increase your profit margin, you will get them to listen to it. The second thing is when you start looking at asset turnover, how many products can actually get out there, volume. And when you start looking at that, when you build a useful and usable product, a lot of times they automatically go. If you have built a product that the user wants, the user will, and if you have a good marketing strategy, get there, you will have a huge asset turnover, and therefore your margin multiplied by the volume and the cost it takes to do that. So think about it. When you do design right, it saves you about 100 times more than actually going and fixing the product right? That's the value that you're creating. Therefore, you don't have to spend so much money to go out there and then basically test it out. And that's basically back to my initial question, is $1 in designer should actually be $10 in return. And when you start thinking in that language, you go to the business leaders and start talking in their own language. I can increase your ARR, annual recurring revenue. I can increase your MRR, your monthly recurring revenue. By doing these things, I can decrease your churn rate by actually creating more engagement. You are talking business. And when we talk their language, you will get the business to listen to us. And that is the foundational aspect of making sure that we are driving clear business value through design. So that said, in summary, I just want to again state, you have to have the right focus, the right alignment, the right governance, and the right language. At least 4 ways to evolve further, right? This is at least on the highest level as you scratch the surface of how does design truly drive business value. These are 4 tips that I wanted to at least share in the webinar today. So coming back, I wanted to kind of make sure that the whole intent of the webinar was to at least give you a sense of where the profession is going and why do we need to lead the business? Why do we need a leading with business for design leads program? It's foundationally to kind of start understanding what are the elements of a good design culture. So you start noticing, how do I start impacting that, right? The way you should evolve, and some of them we actually shared today, but we will go deeper into each one of them. How do you actually achieve organizational alignment and focus? There's a whole technique that we created at UX React in the playbook called an experience roadmap. Product managers have roadmap, marketing managers have roadmap, where is an experience roadmap? So we created our own technique that actually we want to share a little bit more about, that allows for design leads and business leads to kind of look at experientially, what's my roadmap, how am I defining that, where are we going? And within that, you can map your experiments and so on. And finally, how do you understand where the design has impact? Which areas can we focus on and so on? A few of the things that we have planned is, we'll listen to earnings calls and then we will be able to extract design problems and design opportunities out of earnings calls. You should be able to look at a balance sheet and then study an organization's balance sheet and start identifying opportunities. Again, very hard to do all of this in 3 weeks, but we will do our best to kind of have that dialogue and share that with the group. Because for us, the biggest value is not how many people sign up for the program, but the biggest value is how many people can go and do this. And when it does it, actually truly the design comes to that pedestal that it belongs, where businesses look at it and say, I need designers, there's no doubt about that. So as I was sharing with you, the technique of an experience roadmap that allows you to foundationally talk a little bit more about, how do you change manage an organization? How do I kind of go impact strategically different product roadmaps, marketing roadmaps? How do you create an experience roadmap on your end? We'll also talk a little bit more about the business model canvas. This is an awesome tool because I believe this tool is created for designers. It's very visual, illustrative. We'll not teach you how to do a business model canvas, but the factor is that people actually enable you to how to create a business model canvas. But more importantly, the next step of that is how do you extract design problems from a canvas is what we will start talking a little bit more on. Like, how do you impact revenue streams? How do you impact value proposition? How do you impact customer relationship? That's the conversation we will have more so on the design side. So thank you again. I hope this was useful, and we want to open it up for Q&A. And this is the best part, as I said. I'd love to kind of learn more on what you guys have as clarifying questions. So how are we doing the Q&A, Sarah? Or
Right, so there are no questions at the moment.
Okay, here it is. Yeah.
In the box. But if people could use the raise hand tool, I'm not sure if you have it available. Yes. Just to signal if you are actually in a design lead at your organization. Okay, so I see a couple hands go up. More coming up. Satyam, I'm guessing you can see this as well on your end.
I can, I'm looking at it, yeah.
Okay, so if you could, okay, we do have a question. So Jessica's asking if she can get a breakdown of the workshop itself.
Sure, Sarah, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure, so you can actually go, Satyam, if you can go back up to that takeaway slide. So it is three 2-hour sessions held on Fridays. And the first day, the day one of the three, will be around, again, setting up that context, going deeper into the ways that you can involve. We have more context and examples and exercises you can do. Then we'll actually go into understanding how to impact design culture at an organization, including how do we actually get cohesion around experience and the design offerings of an organization. And by that, I mean, how do you get different departments from sales to marketing to engineering to product all aligned on the same thing and in driving value. And we'll go deeper into that through the experience roadmap tool that we showed. And then finally on day 3, we'll go into really the language, like how can you speak to the business model canvas? How can you understand where design has impact? How can you actually derive, listening to an earnings call or looking at an annual report, the design principles that are going to affect your work and the design opportunities that are available for you to go after. Does that help, Jessica? There's also the link online with the syllabus. Okay, so Michael asks, what are the best ways to explain the design process with respect to communicating business outcomes and end user outcomes?
What are the best ways? Could you repeat that again just one more time to register that?
Sure. So what are the best ways to explain the design process with respect to communicating business outcomes and end user outcomes?
So I think I'll try to take a stab at it, right? And I'll at least try to take a stab on how we solve it within UX Reactor. When you're looking at business impact and user impact, the foundational aspect of the design process is the design brief. When you write up the design brief, within our design brief, we have a framework called the P-Postal. It stands for, or Postal, stands for what problem are we solving and what outcome are we achieving. At that very point, even before you design any screens, you're very clearly documenting what user problem, what business problem, what user outcome, and what, one second. Okay, so what user problem, what business problem are we trying to go after? And once you know what exactly the user problem and the business problem is, or at least you can relate to it, it foundationally changes everything that you're going to do subsequent to that. That, I believe, is the most critical part of the process. But more importantly, your kickoffs, how you are doing your requirement grooming, we call it product thinking. You're working with your product managers. That discussion has to evolve. Your research, how you're doing your research, what kind of aspects are you doing when you're doing your research? Are you just purely looking at formative questions? Are you looking at questions on why are they doing this? Is there a newer opportunity that I can create, a newer business model we can create? You're starting to think that way. So it's a mindset. As business thinking is a mindset, everything in your process has to kind of change and evolve around that. When you present your designs, you're talking the business language. And you're saying that the reason why we are doing these 2 workflows is because it saves 5 clicks, and these 5 clicks will actually be worth about $1 million in saving, right? You're talking all these, and that's why it's a business thinking more than actually business skills. And everything around you will just start making more and more sense. And the same design process is exactly what we should use. You discover, design, and deliver, but and iterate, of course, in between. But the factor is everything in there has a flavor of business.
Thanks. Michael, did that help answer your question? Okay, great. Someone else has asked, can you explain more on the relationship between DuPont equation and the UX role in achieving it?
So I'll go back to that, right? So the UX role, as I was explaining it, is, let's say if a UX designer was to come into an organization and says, I can increase your profit margin, right? Let's just take the profit margin aspect. Now the person will look at you and say, how can you increase my profit margin? You're a designer. There's a lot of ways, right? So when you design a product, there's a whole construct of a design premium. Why do we pay more for a better design product that does more for me? And when the user starts getting more value out of the product, you can start charging a premium. And most products, you'll start noticing this everywhere around you. Better experiences around you are always more expensive because they know what value they're creating, whether that's a good restaurant, a good product. And as a UX designer, you are the one who's creating those experiences. So that's the way you start looking at making an impact. You can start saying that, hey, we can solve this problem. We see this problem in the market. We can solve it. No one else does it. You can charge $1 extra for this. That's how product managers think. We just need to bring that same skill here. Just if product managers are learning the skills of design, designers and design leads should be talking the same language from the product standpoint. The same with, how do you make sure that, you're selling a volume of product? You go after users, you go after areas that have not been thought about before. And if you're able to come back and say, hey, doctors are using this product this way, but we can tweak this and make pharmacists use it the other way. There you go. You created a whole new set of a market opportunity. And then you actually are able to create a more amount of assets that are getting sold the same amount of effort. And that's just fundamentally how you start thinking about it. And as a designer, as a UX designer, that mindset shift is going to start showing in your conversation, showing what in the questions you ask, and obviously the value you create.
Thanks, Satyam. Michael has asked, as a UX director of a UX agency, we don't often get to see the tangible outcomes of our work because clients keep this data private. Thus, we often have to work with theoretical outcomes and speak to some of those intangible outcomes you describe. Any suggestions for how we might reconcile this, or is this a byproduct of working at an agency?
I mean, again, you're talking to a founder of kind of an agency. One of the things we do is we mitigate that by actually having longitudinal relationships where we actually end up being the design team for our partner. So that to that extent, we are fundamentally, their sole design organization supporting them. So we get a lot of data there. But yes, I agree with the statement that design firms are a little bit handicapped. But then again, handicap, if you look at the journey of business value creation, when you kick off a project, when you do the discovery for a project, a lot of the data is available. You can look at how many people are coming to the product, how many people are dropping off. You can start looking at that data early on, and a lot of your testing and iterations and so on and so forth will also give you directional indication that is this actually now better or worse. Now, yes, you may not have final data after implementation, but then the challenge is even in a large organization, most times a designer will not see, unless you're working on a B2C organization where, like in Yahoo, my co-founder was, one of the design leads at Yahoo, and he basically could see, and he was a principal researcher for Yahoo Search. He could see results in matter of days. He could say that, we bolded this particular search suggestion, and immediately the company made a $15 million value. And so they could get to that level, but that's the extreme side of it. Most products, you don't even if you're in-house in a company, it's very hard to kind of correlate it because the correlation instrumentation doesn't exist. So a lot of times it is always triangulation. That's kind of where it ends up at, except for where you are like highly instrumented data-centric organizations like the Yahoos, the Amazons, the Googles of the world. But the rest of the 90%, you triangulate. So I would say that is way how you do it. But then again, a lot of in the discovery too, you can create clear hypothesis, and in your user testing, you can kind of test it. But you will for sure know how you're making that impact. The final dollar value obviously has to be run through financial models, which most companies, most design agencies don't have access to because they don't have that data coming in directly. But still, you can get at least with a confidence of about 60 to 70%, you can get good directional data of have you made a business impact or not.
Thanks, Satyam. Michael, I hope that helped. Oh, I see your answer. Any other questions? I do see questions around the slides and recording. UXPay will be making this available, and I'll also put the link to the short course in the chat. Okay, actually Lalit has a question around taking critique in design. So Lalit, maybe you can also elaborate on this. So are you saying if your stakeholder is external and is giving you critique, on your design, how to take that? Or is it for both internal and external feedback?
So, see, I think critique comes from a point of perspective. It's a different topic, the way, and we have a different play for it. You always have to anchor all your critique around the design problems you're trying to solve or a business problem you're trying to solve. A lot of times critique can't be that Uber does this well or X does it well and therefore you didn't do it. I had a product manager a long time back who were like, Apple's doing everything left-centered labels. Why are you doing it right-centered? That's not critique. That's just an opinion. A critique is around a design problem. A critique is around, have you solved the problem that you intended to, and do you have empirical data that tells you that you've solved the problem, whether business or a user, and whichever way it is. And then you're critiquing the different ways you're solving the problem, different variations of going at it. So internal or external, I think setting up the critique is more important than the critique itself. A lot of times, and this is a classic example I would tell many people, both at UX Reactor, we have gotten into that routine but then more importantly, outside when I was at other design firms, people would come in and start showing a screen. And the critique is always going to end up becoming, I'm going to react to the screen. I have no context, I have no idea. So setting up the critique and the design review is very important. Actually, I would say more important than the critique session itself. And when you set it up and you say that these are the design problems we're going at, these are the different ways we're going to be approving it. If you have different ways of thinking about it, let's talk about it. Let's anchor to the design problems and the design opportunities we're going at. That actually will help that critique go in really well. I hope that answers your question, Lalit.
Okay, I've added the link to the short course in the chat. And then MS asks, how would you suggest getting access to a client's financial models? That is, how to be valuable enough.
See, this is interesting. One of the plays we created at UX Reactor was, can you just listen to the client's earnings call? And a lot of times people actually don't even know that, a lot of the data for the clients, especially if they're publicly traded client, is available in open, in public domain. And one of the things we will do is how do you kind of extract design problems out of an earnings call in the session. But at UX Reactor, when we do this, we were able to kind of extract a list of about half a dozen design problems when we did this internally in less than 30 minutes of listening to an earnings call of a client. Right? When you'll start noticing, because they'll start talking, and when you start listening to words like adoption, retention, churn rate, you start noticing, and all of them you notice that they are tools that you have for how do I improve churn rate. They're tools that you have on how do I increase adoption. They're tools around we are going into new markets. These are all words that you're hearing, but then what does new markets mean? That means you have to study the market. You have to kind of build different experiments for them. You have to build a research model for that. You have to build insights for that. There's all these things that come into your mind as soon as you listen to some trigger words, and there's a lot of those trigger words within the earnings call. So there's a lot of those data available. Then there's also public data available. Now, if it's a private company, a lot of this onus comes into doing it a good kickoff. A kickoff is where you're actually extracting it. And then if you become a client, if they are truly a client, then you should ask for all that information. Most times the clients will look at you and like, why are you asking for my 2020 roadmap plan? Why are you asking for, what did not my 2019 reflection or a SWOT analysis? And then but the answer is, again, if you're going in as a consultant, you should ask for all those things. If you're going as a contractor, obviously everyone's going to look you in your eye and say, why are you wasting my time? You're being paid to just do what I'm telling you. So be very aware. If you're going as a consultant, you should ask for that. A lot of the companies have this in public domain. In fact, their own design teams most times don't even know that, what the way the business is going. It's a very deep topic. Again, it takes years of practice to get there. The hope for us is that we just move this profession, as you again engaging with UXPA, to get us to kind of get to that edge one step at a time. So again, some of this may be a lot of information, but I apologize. There's really no other way of providing it.
I'll just also add from my experience of partnering with our clients. Also having access to attending some of their all hands meetings, any keynotes that their founders do also gives good insight into their goals and their long-term goals and their short-term goals. And it's been really helpful to also use that same language that they've used internally with on a more, you know, informal basis with them as well. Okay, so there's another question from Yogendra around, is analytics the only way by which we can calculate ROI of UX effort in monetary terms?
Is analytics the only way? I'm guessing when you say analytics, you're talking about you know, click rates and so on and so forth. The answer is yes and no. There is qualitative methods of doing it, but analytics actually, if it is retrospective analytics where you're looking back at data, how the users have reacted to it, that obviously gives you a very high confidence of where it is. Otherwise, you may have to kind of look at qualitative data and then you'll have to kind of extrapolate it. The answer is any data that you create with whatever the confidence is, you just need to kind of document it that way. But the answer is analytics, where you have available, and especially if it is user analytics, will give you a much higher confidence. But then if you're looking at future iterations and stuff, obviously there's no analytics to that. So you will have to create that. Right? Even simple things like when you do, you know, we are working with a client right now where we're going to be testing the product with 50 different users on a quick, you know, unmoderated study. That's still a good, reasonable sample to kind of, that's also analytics to some extent when you can extract and say what are the, you know, time to completion or time, you know, you can take sus scores. There's so many ways you can look at data. NPS is another way that you can triangulate a lot. A lot of companies are investing in NPS, but then our designers kind of driving that. Then there is organizations that are looking at you know, churn rate and building data around that. So you should be able to extract from that. The answer is there is a lot of qualitative and quantitative models. The more analytics you have, the more confidence you have. That's the unfortunate part of data, but there is ways that you do it. It just takes longer.
Thank you, Satyam. I believe there are no more questions at the moment. If anyone is having problems opening the link to the short course, please try in Chrome, Firefox, or Safari. And if you're still having problems, you can message me privately.
So there you go. This is a classic example, right? So if you had users who are coming in from none of these three, which still could be a small thing, that's loss of revenue, a loss of impact. And that's just foundationally where you look at as a designer or a developer, you start looking at how do everything you see is as a designer is a business opportunity. And when you get into that mindset shift, you know, you're making a lot of value, and then you'll start asking those questions then you become partners. You don't become a supporter, you become a strategic partner. And that's the shift that we need to make if you want to continue pushing this. Awesome. So if you do not have any more questions, you know, there will be a follow-up email going in. But if you do not have any more questions, thank you again for taking you know, your time. Yeah, as I said, time is the most precious resource, and spending that listening to this webinar. Feel free to kind of send us a note anytime. Our emails are provided. Actually, we should have put it on the end slide, but both Sarah and I are very passionate about this topic. Always feel free to send us a note, and we'd be happy to kind of always elaborate as needed. Cool.
So
thank you, guys. Anything else, Sarah?
I believe we'll be handing it back to Carm.
Okay.
Thank you all. Thank you for all the lovely comments. that case, yes. So as Karim had mentioned, you will be receiving the recording and the slides. And as I mentioned before, if you do have any issues opening the slides or opening the short course link, you can email hello@uxreactor.com and we'll get back to you.
Cool.
Okay, so it looks like we're wrapping up. How are we doing, Satyam and Sarah?
We've just about ended.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending this month's webinar. Again, make sure you register for the short course, uxta.org, under education and short courses. And we will see you guys in a few weeks. Again, early bird registration is open for the UXTA 2020 conference in Baltimore. So thank you again, and hope you enjoyed the webinar, and please register for the short course. Bye.
Cool. Take care.
Bye, everyone. And yes, the recording will be available.
Bye.